It started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in downtown Los Angeles. The kind of sun-bleached day where the air feels stale and everyone's in a hurry to be somewhere they probably don't want to be. Johnny Depp, dressed down his usual loose shirt, worn jeans, and an old hat pulled low, was driving his vintage black Chevy truck, the one he'd bought after rapping Pirates all those years ago. He liked to drive himself. No driver, no entourage, just him and the hum of the old engine, windows cracked open to the city's heat and noise. He'd just left a quiet lunch with his lawyer, contract stuff, nothing dramatic for once, and was heading back to his rented bungalow in West Hollywood. At a red light near an industrial strip, a beat-up silver sedan edged up beside him. Johnny barely noticed. He was humming to himself, drumming the steering wheel. The light flipped green. He eased forward. Then, wham! The sedan swerved right into his front fender with a screech that made him slam the brakes. The impact was enough to jolt him forward, but not enough to deploy an airbag. Before he could even register what happened, the sedan's door flung open. Out stumbled a man, mid-30s, wiry, hair slicked back with sweat and cheap gel. His name, Johnny would find out later, was Kyle Mercer. But right then he was just a stranger pounding on Johnny's window, face twisted in a fake mask of pain and rage. Johnny sat still for a second, gathering himself. The guy, Kyle, kept banging on the window, shouting about neck pain, screaming, "You blind or what? Look what you did, man." The light behind turned green, then red again. Horns blared. Some people slowed down but kept moving. LA etiquette. Nobody wanted trouble. Johnny slowly lowered the window halfway. His sunglasses hid his eyes, but Kyle leaned in, trying to get a good look. "You're gonna pay for this. You wrecked my car. My back's busted. I'm calling the cops unless you settle this now." Johnny stayed calm. Decades in Hollywood had taught him to read performances, and Kyle's was all flailing limbs and cheap drama. Johnny's voice was steady. "You swerved into me, pal. Relax. Let's swap insurance." Kyle's eyes flicked around nervously. From the passenger side, another guy stepped out, bulkier, maybe 40, tattoos peeking from a too-tight t-shirt. This was Dean, Kyle's witness. He leaned against Johnny's truck, arms crossed. "Better do what he says," Dean said. "You look like the kind of guy who doesn't want trouble." Johnny studied them, two hustlers, playing out the oldest trick in the book. A small crowd was forming on the sidewalk. Phones out. Johnny didn't want a scene, but he wasn't about to hand over cash either. He killed the engine and stepped out. As soon as he did, Kyle's bravado slipped. Just a flicker. Maybe he recognized the face beneath the hat and the old sunglasses. But he didn't let on. "You got cash?" Kyle pressed. "Or you want the cops crawling all over this?" Johnny tilted his head, calm as ever. "Sure. Call them," he said. "I insist." Dean shifted, annoyed. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They wanted easy money, quick, not an actual cop report. But the real twist was coming, and none of them knew who they'd picked. Dean's smirk cracked a little when Johnny pulled his phone from his pocket, scrolling with deliberate calm to dial 911. The two hustlers stiffened. This wasn't their script. They expected panic, a desperate wallet open to make it all go away. Instead, Johnny just leaned against his battered truck like he had all day to burn. "Hey," Kyle snapped, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "No need to get the cops, man. We can work this out like gentlemen." Johnny cocked an eyebrow, amused at the word gentleman. He kept the phone pressed to his ear, the dial tone loud enough for Kyle to hear. "I think it's the perfect time to get them involved. Don't you?" Dean stepped forward, puffing up his chest. He shot Kyle a sharp look that screamed, "Fix this." Kyle switched tactics, hands out, fake calm dripping from every pore. All right. Maybe I overreacted. My bad. It's just, my car's my livelihood, man. I drive for deliveries. No insurance. You know how it is." Johnny didn't flinch. He knew exactly how it was. A small-time con they'd run a dozen times on distracted drivers with expensive cars. Only this wasn't a trust fund rookie or an old retiree with trembling hands. This was Johnny Depp, and the part he'd always played best was the man who doesn't scare easy. The 911 operator picked up. Johnny's voice was smooth. "Yeah, hi. I'm at Alameda and 7th. There's been a collision. 2 men are here, trying to shake me down for cash. Better send a cruiser." Kyle's face turned the color of sour milk. Dean hissed under his breath. "What the hell, man?" Johnny smiled. a tight little grin that never reached his eyes. "Oh, and you two should probably stay right where you are. Wouldn't want the officers thinking you're fleeing the scene." A few bystanders chuckled. Cameras were rolling. Dean cursed under his breath. Kyle started to pace, eyes darting from the smashed fender to Johnny's calm, unreadable face. He had no idea whose name he'd just tangled with, but soon he'd find out. The sirens came faster than Kyle expected, probably because the bystanders had already called them too, curious to see what the commotion was about. A black and white cruiser rolled up, lights strobing red and blue over the cracked pavement. The crowd shifted, phones lifted higher. Johnny stayed leaning against his truck, arms crossed now, his battered hat tilted back just enough to reveal a glimpse of the face that had sold out theaters for decades. Though here, on a grimy street corner, most people still hadn't connected the dots. The first officer I was young, early 30s, sharp jawline, name tag reading Officer Reed. He gave the situation a quick once-over, then fixed his gaze on Kyle, who instantly dropped the tough guy act and switched to an injured puppy. "Officer, thank God," Kyle gushed. "This guy smashed into me, and now he's threatening to leave without paying. I got whiplash, man, my neck." Reed turned to Johnny. "Sir, your side of it." Johnny kept his voice calm, casual. "They hit me. On purpose, from what it looks like. Then they asked for cash. I suggested we all wait for you." Reed's eyes narrowed. He glanced at the dented fender, then at Kyle's beat-up sedan, which suddenly looked suspiciously unscratched except for a few old scrapes. Dean shifted uncomfortably behind Kyle, arms folded, eyes on the ground. Johnny pulled his wallet and handed over his license and registration. Reed checked them, did a double take at the name. His brow furrowed, a flicker of recognition. He glanced at Johnny's face again, like he couldn't quite believe it. But professionalism held. "All right, gentlemen," Reed said evenly. "Nobody's leaving. We're gonna run this properly." Dean hissed at Kyle in a low voice. "You said this would be easy." Kyle shot back. "Shut up, man. Shut up." Johnny just watched them, quiet, steady, letting them dig themselves deeper. Because sometimes, he thought, the best role is the one where you don't say a word. You just let the scene fall apart on its own. Officer Reed signaled for his partner, an older cop named Ortega, gray hair tucked under his cap, to check the sedan while he kept his eyes on Johnny and the two scammers. Ortega circled the beat-up car, flashlight flicking over the dents. From where Johnny stood, he could see the scratches were mismatched, old damage layered under fresh scuff marks, barely convincing as a new accident. Kyle tried to follow Reed, talking too much. "Look, officer, we don't want to press charges or anything. We just want him to pay for the damage and my medical bills. I can't afford the hospital." Reed cut him off. "Sir, you said you were hurt. You need medical? Want me to call you an ambulance?" Kyle blinked. No, I'll be fine. It's just sore, you know. Don't want to waste taxpayer money." Johnny hid a grin under his breath. Dean glared at him, like it was his fault the scam was falling apart. A few people in the gathering crowd were whispering now. That's when Johnny knew someone had finally recognized him. He heard it, half mumbled. "Is that Johnny Depp?" The word rippled through the onlookers like a spark catching dry grass. Kyle didn't notice, too busy trying to keep the spotlight on his fake injury. "We can settle this now. Cash. No hassle." Officer Reed crossed his arms. "You're saying you don't want an ambulance. You want cash instead?" Kyle froze. Even Dean could see where this was headed. Reed turned to Johnny, tone shifting, more respectful now. "Sir, do you want to press charges for attempted fraud?" Johnny shrugged. "Let's see where it goes, shall we?" Reed smirked. "Good enough for me." Kyle's face drained of color. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff he didn't know was there 5 minutes ago. Dean tried to meld into the background, but Ortega caught him with a firm hand on the shoulder. "You both got ID?" Reed asked. Dean mumbled, "Left it at home." Reed sighed. "Of course you did." And right there, under the midday sun, it finally clicked for Kyle who he just tried to hustle. His eyes darted at Johnny's face, the sunglasses, the hat, the calm smile. "Oh no," Kyle whispered. Johnny gave him a small, amused nod, tipping the hat just enough. "Surprise." Kyle's mouth opened, but no words came out. The pieces slammed together in his head. The voice, the grin, that unmistakable aura that was impossible to fake. He just tried to scam Johnny Depp. Dean, slower on the uptake, still didn't get it. He tugged at Kyle's arm. "What's wrong with you? Say something, man." But Kyle was frozen, staring at Johnny like he'd seen a ghost. The bystanders were not so frozen. They leaned in closer, phones up, recording every second. A couple of them were whispering Johnny's name out right now, louder and louder. The realization spread through the little circle of onlookers until it broke like a wave of soft gasps and disbelieving laughter. Reed shot Johnny a look, part curious, part amused. "So, you are who I think you are, huh?" Johnny didn't need to confirm it. He just gave a lopsided grin, the kind that made him famous, that sly, half-twisted smirk that told you he was always 10 steps ahead, even when standing still. He leaned closer to Kyle and Dean, voice soft but cutting. "You boys really ought to pick your marks better." Dean's eyes flicked to Kyle. "What's he talking about?" Kyle hissed through clenched teeth. "It's Johnny Depp, you idiot." Dean's face turned beet red, panic flushing up his neck. He turned to Officer Reed, desperate to steer the moment back. "Look, officer, this is all a misunderstanding. We'll just go." Reed didn't budge. "You're not going anywhere. Fraud, attempted extortion, we'll see what sticks." Johnny stepped back, giving them space to stew in their own mess. The crowd was buzzing now, phones catching every angle. Somewhere in the back, a kid called out, "Johnny, love you, man." Johnny gave a small wave but kept his focus on the two con men. Ortega pulled out a small notepad, scribbling down the basics. Kyle pleaded under his breath, "Please, Mr. Depp." "Johnny, we didn't know it was you." Johnny's smile faded just enough to make the next words sting. "You didn't care who it was. That's your problem." Kyle looked ready to bolt, but Dean knew it was too late. The sirens in the distance said more backup was coming, and so was the end of their petty little scam. As the second cruiser pulled up, the block turned into a show. Pedestrians slowed down, drivers rubbernecked from their windows, and the phones kept rolling. If Kyle or Dean thought they could slink away quietly, the universe clearly had other plans. Reed and Ortega stepped aside to meet the backup, filling them in with clipped sentences. Dean kept glancing at Johnny like he might still talk his way out of this if he just found the right words. But Kyle knew better. His eyes darted from Johnny to the police to the small sea of people watching. His shoulders slumped. The fight in him was gone. Johnny just looked calm. He gave a polite nod to the people filming, a half smile for a teenager who shouted, "Pirates forever." Then he turned back to the mess he hadn't asked for, but knew exactly how to handle. Ortega came back with a pair of cuffs dangling from his belt. "All right, gentlemen, hand where I can see him." Kyle started to protest. "Hey, whoa, can't we just..." But Reed stepped in front of him. "You're under arrest for attempted fraud and extortion. If Mr. Depp wants to press charges..." Kyle's head jerked up. "You don't have to do this. We're sorry. It was just..." Johnny's eyes were level, steady. "You want a quick cash? Maybe next time pick someone who scares easier." Dean turned his palms out, voice cracking. "Please, man, I've got a kid." Johnny cut him off, voice low enough only Dean could hear. "So, what is everyone you'd have scammed next?" It wasn't anger on Johnny's face, more like disappointment. He'd seen too much of this side of people to be surprised anymore. Ortega clicked the cuffs on Dean's wrists. Reed finished with Kyle, reading him his rights as the crowd murmured in disbelief. When it was done, Reed turned back to Johnny, half smiling now that the circus was nearly wrapped. "Sorry you had to deal with this today, sir. Didn't recognize you at first." Johnny chuckled, tipping his hat. "That's half the fun." He leaned against his truck again, calm as ever, watching Kyle and Dean being guided toward the cruisers, two men who thought they could bully an easy target and wound up exposed in front of half of LA. As the cruiser's doors slammed shut behind Kyle and Dean, the crowd that had gathered finally began to break apart, though clusters of people lingered, talking excitedly, phones still in hand. Somewhere, a young woman nervously stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mr. Depp, I'm so sorry they did that to you. Can I get a photo?" Johnny looked at her, maybe 19, wide-eyed, still half in shock that this roadside drama involved her favorite movie star. He gave her that warm, crooked grin. "Of course, sweetheart. Just make it quick before the whole block turns into a premiere." She giggled and fumbled for a phone. Johnny leaned down, posed with his easy charm, the kind of presence that made people forget the chaos of just a few minutes ago. A couple more fans mustered up the courage too. Johnny obliged them all. A snapshot here, a handshake there. letting his calm smile erase the sour taste Kyle and Dean had left behind. Officer Reed came back over, glancing at the line of starstruck fans with an amused shake of his head. You sure you don't want to press more charges? We can add resisting, lying, reckless driving. Johnny pocketed his license, pulling his hat low again. Nah, the lesson's enough. Jail food's going to teach them more than I ever could. Reed laughed under his breath. Fair enough. I guess they'll have a story to tell when they're not telling it behind bars. Johnny's eyes narrowed just a bit, a flicker of mischief behind them. If they're smart, they'll leave my name out of it next time. The bystanders started drifting away, the excitement fading into stories they'd tell friends for weeks. You'll never believe who I saw on Alameda. Johnny climbed into his old truck, the dented fender still mocking the whole farce. He turned the key but didn't pull away yet. For a moment, he just sat there, watching the last cruiser roll out, red and blue lights flashing away into the afternoon traffic. Some people spend their lives pretending to be someone they're not, he thought. Some people just are who they are, even when no one believes it. Johnny tapped the wheel, then looked out at the last kid waving a shaky phone in the air. He gave a two-finger salute, the engine rumbled, and he pulled out slow, like he had all the time in the world. Johnny turned the truck out of the side street, easing into the slow afternoon traffic that crawled past old warehouses and corner diners. He could still see a few of the bystanders in his mirror, the ones who'd hung back to get that final glimpse, hoping he'd rolled down the window for a wave. He did, just once, and then focused ahead. He should have been annoyed, he supposed. Wasted time, bad energy, two petty grifters who'd probably pull the same stunt on some other poor soul down the line. But all Johnny felt was a strange flicker of amusement. Not because he liked trouble, he was too old for cheap chaos, but because there was something funny about the way life kept throwing him these unscripted roles. And today, at least, he played it his way. He stopped at a red light, drumming his fingers on the wheel. In the passenger seat sat his battered leather bag. Inside it, a paperback he'd bought that morning, a new notebook he'd meant to scribble in while sipping coffee. Instead, he got a front row seat to desperation and stupidity, a different kind of story altogether. The light turned green. He eased forward, thinking he'd head down to the beach, maybe find a quiet stretch where nobody cared who he was, nobody wanted a photo or an autograph, and nobody was angling for a payout. But as he drove, his phone buzzed. He flipped it over, a text from an old friend who'd heard the whole thing already. Saw the clip online. You okay? Johnny snorted. The internet always found out first. He typed back, all good. Some roles just play themselves. He slipped the phone onto the seat, rolling the window down to catch a breath of salty air. Ahead, the ocean glinted beyond strip malls and palm trees. He could already see the waves in his mind, endless and clean, a place to wash off the stink of Kyle and Dean's scam. Sometimes the best part of fame, he thought, is when people don't recognize you. Other times, the best part is when they do, just late enough for the truth to sting. Johnny found himself drifting west, following side streets that cut through sleepy neighborhoods and pockets of neon fast food signs. He kept the window cracked open, letting the hum of the city settle him. For all the noise that fame brought, these small, unnoticed corners were where he felt closest to himself. He stopped at a gas station to fill up. The attendant, a young woman with tired eyes and earbuds half lodged in, didn't give him a second look. Perfect. Johnny leaned against his truck while the pump clicked steadily, his mind still replaying the absurd scene from an hour ago. Two grown men, trying to hustle a payout on a dusty street. And him, the so-called Mark, just trying to grab coffee and scribble ideas in a notebook. It was almost funny. Almost. Inside the mini-mart, he grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of gum. When he stepped up to the counter, the girl glanced up at him briefly, then back to her phone. No flash of recognition. No whisper of Jack Sparrow or Edward Scissorhands. Just a nod toward the card reader. He smiled, grateful for the anonymity. Fame was a double-edged sword, sharp and heavy, and today it had sliced through someone else's scheme instead of his own piece. He took his change, thanked her, and stepped back into the late afternoon heat. Back in the truck, Johnny let the engine idle. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a clip someone had tagged him in. Footage of Kyle and Dean handcuffed on the curb, their scam unraveling under the bright sun. The caption read, "Johnny Depp shuts down scammers like a legend." He chuckled, thumb hovering over the video. He almost deleted it, but then he saved it instead. A reminder, maybe, that the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how clever the lie. He pulled onto the road, heading west again. The ocean wasn't far now. He could smell the brine in the air, taste the freedom of it. Whatever storm had hit him earlier was gone, washed away by a moment of simple justice. Sometimes, he thought, you don't have to shout who you are. Sometimes you just let the world find out for itself, and watch the lesson land where it should. Johnny turned off the main road and followed a winding lane that dipped toward the coast. The sun was low now, dipping into a haze of gold that kissed the rooftops and the sea beyond. He could already hear the distant hush of waves smashing against the rocks, a soundtrack that never asked for autographs, never cared for headlines. He parked the truck at a half-empty overlook. No valet, no security, no eyes watching except the gulls circling above. He grabbed his notebook from a seat, slipped out, and leaned against the hood, feeling the warmth of the metal against his back. Down below, the ocean spread out like a promise. The mess of the day, the fake accident, the desperate cons, the flashing cameras, it all seemed to belong to someone else's life now. Out here, he was just a man with a pen and a breeze. Johnny flipped open the notebook, half smiling at the blank page. He didn't always know what he'd write. A line of dialogue, a memory, a stray thought that might someday bloom into a song or a line on screen. Today, though, he just let the pen drift. Some people lie for money. Some people lie for fame. But truth has a way of waiting, even when you're not watching. He closed the book, let the wind flip the pages on its own. A kid with a skateboard cruised past on the sidewalk above the bluff. He glanced at Johnny, did a double take. Recognition flickered behind his eyes, but stayed there. The kid just lifted 2 fingers in a quick salute, and Johnny returned it with a lazy nod. He stayed like that for a while, just the ocean, the salt air, the notebook. Somewhere behind him, the world was probably spinning up the story. Johnny Depp stopped scammers with a single look. He let them write it however they wanted. The truth was quieter, softer, and right now it was his alone. Tomorrow, he'd disappear into the next street, the next diner, the next small pocket of ordinary life that made him feel human again. But for tonight, he had the ocean, and that was enough. The ocean breeze turned cooler as dusk crept in, painting the sky in strokes of purple and fading gold. Johnny sat cross-legged on the hood of his truck now, notebook balanced on his knee. He'd written a few more lines, not enough to call a poem, but enough to remind him why he loved quiet corners like this. He heard the crunch of footsteps before he saw the owner. A man in his 50s, gray-haired but broad-shouldered, approached from the sidewalk with that hesitant curiosity strangers sometimes had when they thought they recognized someone but weren't sure. "Evening," the man said, stopping a few feet away. Johnny dipped his chin. "Evening." The man nodded toward the ocean. "Good spot for clearing your head." Johnny gave a small smile. "Best in town." For a heartbeat, the stranger just watched him, eyes narrowing, piecing it together. Johnny braced himself for the usual. The moment when the name clicks, the rush of questions, the ask for a selfie. But instead, the man just let out a soft chuckle. "You know," he said, "you look a lot like that actor my wife loves." "That right? Pirates and all that." Johnny raised an eyebrow, teasing. "People tell me that sometimes." The man laughed, shaking his head. "Well, whoever you are, good for you. World's too damn loud. Nice to see someone just sitting." With that, he lifted a hand in a casual wave and wandered back to the path, disappearing into the twilight. Johnny watched him go, the quiet grin still tugging at his lips. Not everyone needed to know. Not everyone needed the truth spelled out for them. Some people were content to let a stranger be a stranger, a man and his pen, alone with the sea. He flipped the notebook shut and slid off the hood. The night was coming fast now, wrapping the world in its hush. He'd head back soon. Maybe pick up dinner from a corner spot that didn't care who he was. Maybe scribble more in some late-night cafe where the barista wouldn't bat an eye. He liked it that way. Invisible when he wanted, unmistakable when it counted. Johnny slid back into the driver's seat, the smell of salt and cold metal clinging to his jacket as he pulled the door shut. For a moment he sat there, watching the last glow of sunset slip under the horizon, replaced by a gentle blanket of dusk. His phone, resting on the dashboard, buzzed again, More messages, more clips, people passing the story around like gossip at a diner. Johnny Depp outsmarts scammers. Johnny Depp's roadside lesson. Local cops thank Johnny Depp for teaching crooks a lesson. He didn't open any of them. The world could spin its own tales tonight. He'd had enough headlines in a lifetime to know that half of them got it wrong anyway. What mattered was the part he kept for himself. The moment those punks realized the truth too late, the quiet satisfaction of seeing lies collapse under their own weight. He turned the ignition. The old truck rumbled to life with a gentle cough that reminded him how much he preferred these imperfect machines to the spotless luxury cars Hollywood folks flaunted. They had stories, scratches that meant something. They were real. Johnny eased back onto the coastal road, winding past shuttered surf shops and old motels with flickering neon signs. He caught glimpses of people through cafe windows, couples leaning close, friends laughing over greasy fries, tiny worlds that didn't care who he was. A diner up ahead spilled warm light onto the sidewalk. A flickering sign, open late. Perfect. He pulled in, parked beneath a buzzing glow. Inside, he found a booth by the window and slid into the cracked vinyl seat like he'd done 1,000 times before, in 1,000 towns that blurred together when he closed his eyes. A young waiter came over, pen poised above a battered notepad. He looked half asleep, completely unaware of the man in front of him. Good. Johnny ordered coffee, black, and a slice of whatever pie they had left. When the kid left, Johnny pulled his notebook from his coat, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote one word at the top. Truth. He tapped the pen against the page, watching people drift in and out. Out there, everyone had a version of it. Here, alone with the hum of the diner and the steady drip of the coffee maker, he could shape his own. The coffee arrived steaming, strong enough to jolt the last of the day's tension from his shoulders. Johnny wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the warmth settle into his bones. Outside, the street had gone soft and quiet, the kind of hush only small coastal towns got after dark, when the ocean claimed most of the noise for itself. He caught his reflection in the diner window, the loose hair under his hat, the lines around his eyes that no makeup chair could ever erase. He looked exactly like who he wanted to be tonight. A man nobody noticed, a man nobody bothered. Behind the counter, the waiter flipped through a battered notebook, humming along to an old song drifting from the jukebox in the corner. Two old men argued softly over a chessboard near the door. Somewhere in the back, a fryer hissed and popped, frying up something cheap and salty for the last hungry customers. Johnny's mind wandered back to Kyle and Dean, their smug faces when they thought they'd scored, the panic when they realized they hadn't. For a moment, he wondered what they were doing now. Still in a holding cell, probably, nursing the same cheap excuses they'd tried to sell him. He almost felt sorry for them, almost. But pity was cheap, and those two had asked for the lesson they'd gotten. He jotted another line in the notebook. Some lessons don't come cheap. Some come wearing handcuffs. A smirk tugged at his mouth. He took a sip of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. He wondered if tomorrow the story would still be making rounds online, or if it would vanish under the next piece of celebrity gossip. Either way, he wouldn't lose sleep over it. Tonight was his. The hum of the neon sign, the clink of a spoon against a chipped mug, the hush of the waves a few blocks away. This was the real prize, not headlines or gossip, but this quiet space where the truth sat, patient and simple. He flipped the page again, pen ready for whatever came next. Johnny leaned back in the booth, fingers tapping the pen against his chin. The pie arrived, warm cherry, edges crisp, melting into the plate like a small, sweet reward. He thanked the waiter with a nod. No fanfare, no awkward pause of wait, are you? Just a refill of coffee and a polite smile before the kid disappeared to wipe down another table. The jukebox switched songs, an old Dylan tune curling through the diner like an old friend whispering secrets. Johnny closed his eyes for a second, letting the lyrics wash over him. They reminded him why he loved nights like this. Simple places, simple people, no red carpets or flashes, no questions about roles or box office numbers. He broke off a piece of crust and popped it in his mouth. For a second, he imagined what those scammers must be thinking now. How sure they'd been, how quickly it all fell apart. Part of him felt a spark of that old mischief he used to feel on set when a director yelled cut, and he'd ad-lib something no one expected. Life, he thought, was better unscripted. even the messy parts. Across the diner, the door swung open with a squeak. A young couple stepped in, laughing too loud, flushed from the cold. They slid into a booth 2 down from him, oblivious to the man scribbling lines into an old notebook. He caught a few words: road trip, last minute, just needed to get away. He smiled faintly. He understood that better than most. He glanced at the clock above the counter. Closing time was creeping closer. He didn't mind. He'd linger until the last neon hum died, pay cash, leave a generous tip, and vanish back into the night the same way he'd come in, unannounced, unbothered. He wrote a final line under the word truth. It's out there for anyone who wants it. Just gotta look past the noise. He closed the notebook, pushed the empty plate aside, and cradled his mug for one last sip. Outside, the ocean waited. So did the rest of the night. The neon sign above the door flickered as Johnny stepped out into the night again. The diner's warmth gave way to a crisp breeze that smelled of salt and old wood. He pulled his coat tighter, slipping the notebook into his inside pocket like a secret no one could steal. His old truck sat alone under the street lamp, a stubborn, faithful thing that had carried him through more miles than any private jet ever could. He liked the creak of its door, the rattle when it settled into gear, a reminder that not everything needed to shine to be worth something. Johnny sat for a moment behind the wheel, hands resting on the worn leather. He watched the reflections in the diner's windows, the young couple laughing over pie, the old men still at their chess game. None of them had known who he was. None of them had cared. That was the gift. He turned the key, the engine rumbling awake like an old dog stretching its legs. He eased the truck onto the empty street, headlights sweeping over faded road lines and shuttered shops. No paparazzi hiding behind trash bins tonight. No fans waiting to catch a blurry glimpse for a headline. Just Johnny and the road humming beneath him. A streetlight caught his eyes in the mirror. He saw himself there, just a man with hair too long and stories too tangled to explain in an interview. He chuckled to himself, remembering Kyle and Dean again. Those wide eyes when they'd realized they'd tried to scam the wrong man. He almost wished he could have seen them now, explaining it to their friends or the cops. A turn in the road carried him closer to the water. He cracked the window, letting the roar of the ocean drown out everything else. He didn't need the noise of the world tonight. Not the praise, not the gossip, not the endless questions. Just the hush of waves, the whisper of wind, and the soft truth that he could still disappear when he wanted to. Johnny drove aimlessly for a while, the hum of the tires a lullaby under the old truck's creaks. He passed darkened beach houses and roadside motels with faded neon signs, promising ocean views and no vacancy. Out here, the world felt stripped down to its bones. No red carpets, no lenses peering from hedges, no whispered rumors carried on tabloids. He pulled over at a lookout point perched above the surf, just a guardrail and a battered bench facing the endless dark water. He killed the engine, stepped out, and leaned on the cold metal rail. The ocean was a black, heaving thing beneath the stars, each wave crashing like a truth no lie could drown. He pulled a notebook back out, flipping to a blank page. The pen hovered as he listened to the sea. He thought of Kyle and Dean again, not with anger now, but with a quiet sort of pity. They'd try to turn a stranger into a mark. They'd forgotten that some strangers carry stories sharper than any blade. Sometimes the mark turns out to be the mirror. He scribbled that down and smirked. Maybe someday he'd put these scraps together. A book of nights like this. Encounters too small for the cameras, too real for the headlines. Behind him, a car slowed down on the road, headlights sweeping over the back of his truck before continuing into the dark. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked. Just how he liked it. Johnny tucked the notebook away, feeling the salt air in his hair, the quiet in his chest. He'd handled it his way. No yelling, no show. Just the truth, delivered at just the right moment. A small justice nobody could spin. Tomorrow the world would move on. Another scandal, another rumor, another rumor. But this night would stay his. A lesson written in the hush of waves and the hiss of tires on old coastal asphalt. He slipped back into the truck, ready to let the road carry him farther from the noise. The truck's engine rumbled back to life, a low growl that blended with the ocean's roar below. Johnny settled behind the wheel, one hand resting on the cracked leather, the other drumming the steering wheel in time with the rolling surf. He took one last glance at the empty lookout, the bench, the battered rail, the endless water swallowing secrets whole. As he pulled back onto the road, the town behind him faded into the rearview mirror. Just another place with its share of stories and half-remembered gossip. Tomorrow someone would leak a photo, maybe twist it into something bigger than it was. He knew how these things went. Let them talk. The truth had already happened, and that was enough for him. Headlights cut through the dark, slicing the winding road into pieces of moonlit asphalt. He cracked the window again, letting the salt air sting his face awake. He could already picture the diner's kid telling someone about the scruffy guy who tipped too much and scribbled in an old notebook. Maybe they'd never believe it was Johnny Depp. Maybe they'd never care. He liked that. He liked slipping through the seams, leaving behind only half glimpses and second guesses. A sign for an old roadside and flickered ahead, vacancy spelled out in tired neon. He smiled at that. No fancy suite tonight. No manager fawning over him or fussing over his name on a credit card. Just a quiet room, a rattling heater, and maybe a flickering TV for company. He turned in, wheels crunching on gravel, killed the engine, sat in the dark a moment longer, notebook in his pocket, heart steady, mind calm. Tomorrow the world would wake up hungry for a story. He'd already written his. Thank you for sticking with this ride. If you love real, raw, untold stories like this, hit subscribe, drop a comment below about what you'd do in Johnny's place, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Stay curious, stay kind, and remember, the truth always finds the light.